Now, ISLEXPO 2018, 16th of May 2018, it's the third event of its kind. What's going to be different in 2018?
Well, worth pointing out first and foremost that when we launched ISLEXPO 2 years ago, it was to be a trilogy. So the first one was all about start your business. The second one was about grow your business. This is about relocate your business. But where we are going to take that relocate and expand it to have people relocate to the Isle of Man. Clearly, we've got a growing and positive economy, especially when it comes to jobs. And what we want to do in particular is do an outreach to the Manx diaspora and say, come back to the Isle of Man. There's great opportunity, great jobs available, and use ISLEXPO as that platform.
Now, you say it's a change from grow to locate. Is there an appetite there? Did you find that that's something that at this year's event there was more interest in?
Well, what you have to do is try and do something different to get people to come back. The first year was a single day event and hugely successful, very positive, but it was caused an awful lot of strain trying to deliver all that in one day. We expanded it to 2 days and we've seen a phenomenal increase in terms of attendees, very well received. Something like over 90% of feedback said we will come back again. So our challenge is, well, what are we going to do for this third year? So the theme has changed slightly, but it's still to be about promoting the Isle of Man as we've obviously done this programme for government, an island of enterprise and opportunity, and now we're the Department for Enterprise. What we need to do is promote that enterprise and entrepreneurship as we do this third one.
Now, how successful has it been so far? How do you gauge that success? I mean, it all hinges on this £50 million Enterprise Development Fund. Is this something you can measure?
The first one was about start your business. Therefore, that's what the Enterprise Development Scheme and launching the £50 million fund in that first year, which was just 2.5 years ago. So, yes, that was about investments. And clearly we had a whole host of activities which we've done 2 years. Things like the Pitch It programme, where we had junior achievement doing the young persons and the older persons too. These were really, really well received. So when we talk about success, feedback is great. We know that there is investment actually happening. And if we think of the Enterprise Development Fund, because we're going to do an update for that, which we have to do as mandated through Tynwald, we will demonstrate who we've actually invested with. And that's worth pointing out, it is a sustainable investment fund. So we take investment in terms of equity and loan. So therefore, it is meant to be self-sustaining. So we'll highlight who has actually invested and what the benefit has been. And in particular, we've been very much focused on the number of jobs. So we'll be able to demonstrate that going forward. Other areas in terms of if you wanted to sort of measure this, great is for me is actually sponsorship. So we're launching this now because we're inviting people to sponsor and become involved with it, because each year we've had is increased levels of sponsorship to support this particular event. Big ticket item very clearly, but we're seeing increase in sponsorship, which tells me that businesses, local businesses, think there's value in this event.
What do local businesses get out of it? I mean, there does seem to be a focus on drawing businesses back to the island, getting them, certainly in next year's event, to relocate here. What do local businesses get out of it, apart from the name on a brochure?
Well, yeah, your name on your brochure. This is profiling, if you like, because when we look at media coverage, because we do some, that's another measurement that we look at. And I remember meeting a number of journalists who were from Manchester, Belfast, I think there was one from Scotland, and a host of others. About nearly a dozen of them actually came here to cover it, and they were amazed an island as small as we are and an economy that as diverse as it is would actually get so many people there. So what they've done, if you go back to the sponsorship there, profile is the number one thing, promoting their business and their activity to an audience that is clearly very business focused. So yes, I think, as I say, the proof in the pudding is they're prepared to actually not just stump up but also increase.
Now, you say there's been a 70% increase in delegates visiting the event. Okay, it expanded, it was 2 days rather than one. So you had 1,700 people going through the doors. 92% said, as you've mentioned, they would come back again. But how much of that is actually translated into genuine interest in doing business on the Isle of Man? It's all very well going to a networking event for a couple of days in the Isle of Man, but how is that translating into economic growth for the Isle of Man.
Well, we were talking about jobs, we were talking about investment as well at the same time. Not easy to put so many tangibles on that, except we're trying to collate that, particularly from the sponsorships point of view, to say, okay, we're asking you to sponsor again. Okay, we might ask you to look to go further in terms of that sponsorship, but why are you doing it? You just asked that question just prior, and that's one of the questions that we ask when we look for sponsorship. How would you measure it? How do you think there's value to it? What we can see is feedback that we're getting, and I think it's well worth pointing out this is about promoting the I guess in the old-fashioned way you would call it as a business fair. Many of us have been to these very static, stands, and and it is networking, but this is more about being inspirational. So if you think of the keynote speakers that we've had, some of them are local, and it's great to see great local entrepreneurs willing to give their time up, but we also bring in key people that will try and promote the entrepreneurship as well as motivational, inspirational as well at the same time. So this is about trying to create a culture and an ethos about being an island of enterprise and opportunity. So tangibles, we have them, but the main point here is actually promoting the Isle of Man as a place for enterprise and opportunity, as I say.
Now, you've mentioned that there is a cost to putting on an event like this. The more guest speakers you get over, the more you put into it, the more it's going to cost you. You've also got an additional cost, presumably next year, since you no longer run the Villa Marina.
Well, that's a cost for governments any way you look at it. So you can talk about it being a transaction across a balance sheet in many ways, but that's not the main issue. Yes, it is a big ticket item, six-figure sum. We don't know what that final figure will be, dependent upon the sponsorship, which is why we're launching it at this particular stage. But what we do know is if we didn't do it, and this is one of the other comments that came back fairly consistently, if we didn't do it, what are you doing to promote the Isle of Man? And as we're looking as next year as using ISLEXPO as a platform, a forum to promote the Isle of Man as a place to come back to the Isle of Man, reach out to friends, ambassadors, anyone who's interested in the Isle of Man, and then particularly the Manx diaspora, and say, hey, come back to the Isle of Man, there's great opportunity. Because the more jobs we can fill with those people, coming back to the Isle of Man, I think, we know that there's very clear evidence that is an economic benefit.
Now, you say it was always meant to be a trilogy of events over a 3-year period. Over the last 2 years, the event will have been marketed as being put on by the Department of Economic Development to build up that reputation, that name, that association with the Isle of Man and that department, and doing business with the Isle of Man via the department. Will the rebrand effectively undo some of the work you've done, now that people have to get used to the Department for Enterprise rather than what they're used to as economic development?
So I guess 2 years ago we launched the Enterprise Development Fund. Programme for Government has highlighted the Island of Enterprise and Opportunity. So Department for Enterprise fits perfectly with that. And that's really the synergy. And when we arrived at the name, because obviously people ask, well, what does it really mean? Well, there's a lot of work that's gone on. We're going to do obviously the executive agencies, which is, another discussion point altogether. But the main purpose is the department must remain focused in on its core function, which is strategy and policy, and clearly we want to promote enterprise, and that's why the name fits very well.
Now, you say one of the aims of the event itself is to future-proof the job market in the Isle of Man. How do you do that when it's difficult to predict what the job market is going to be, what skills are going to be needed in the future with the growth of some sectors and the decline in others? Yeah,
and I think when we talk about a diverse economy, we also mean a dynamic economy, ever changing. And this is a point because what's interesting is we had this opportunity to promote the Isle of Man and what the opportunities are in those wide range of, and we purposely done this in terms of not promoting one specific industry, but really the span of industries that we've got. And I think this is what really does, and I guess it's hard to put this in a tangible comment really, and that is, this says, hey, the Isle of Man's opportunities are wider than we would all think about, because we all tend to be quite narrow in what we see and what we don't, and because there are industries on this island that are relatively invisible, and I think of the tech-related industries because they're merging with some of the more traditional industries. You got med tech, you got fintech, you got clean tech, and there's a whole host of those. And the tech-related and digital Isle of Man, which is where we're focusing one of our executive agencies, is absolutely vital, because disruption is happening in a huge number of industries, and what we need to do is promote all that in the entrepreneurship that we're trying to promote as an ethos for an economy going forward.
It's coordinated by an outside firm. You've outsourced it, if you like. Why isn't it done in-house by the department?
Well, a lot of times what we want to be is a smaller, smarter government. We talked about some of those comments, and really we didn't believe we had the resource to be able to actually deliver an event of this particular magnitude, because it is a significant magnitude, but it is a public-private partnership. Whilst we've contracted people to event manage it, we clearly are obviously very supportive of it. So we have our team working with Revel, who've done a great job these last 2 years, it has to be said, and I applaud them for that, and consequently what we're trying to do is to now do it even better, which is the challenge, of course. How do you do it differently? How do you get people to keep on coming back? So you've always got to you've got to have something different, and bringing in that outside influence has helped us do that.
Now, you mentioned it was always meant to be a trilogy of events. 2018 is the third year. Will it go on beyond there, or is that the end for it?
Well, I think what we got to do is first and foremost, you have to evaluate what it has delivered. Where you started the interview, which is absolutely appropriate and right. We've got to measure this, we've got to evaluate it, and we'll have 3 years then to be able to measure it, and that will be very valuable. And then we got to say, well, what are we going to do next year to promote business, promote industry, and the opportunities on our island. So whilst we started on a journey to say yes, there would be 3, the question is what we'll do the following year, and I can't answer that at this particular moment, because we need to measure what the 3 years has actually done. First things first, we did the first year. Was it a success? Yes, great. Second year, we evolved it, changed it into 2 days, widened it, and that was another great success. And now this is the third year, which we're aiming again to try and be a success. And the last but not least, I think, point that I'd want to make is about confidence. We want confidence in our economy, confidence in our future, and you look at all the disruption all around us, our shores, globally. The Isle of Man still has, I think, a very positive economic outlook, and I see that in the depth and the breadth of our industry here on the Isle of Man, which is very reassuring, I have to say. And what we want to do is to keep that momentum driving forward. But to keep that momentum driving forward, you've got to continually change. That's part of having a dynamic economy.